I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts, but here I am. My wife, Laura, and I have been together for 9 years, married for 6. We met in college, built a life together, and for the longest time, I thought we were solid. She always gave me this feeling that we were a team, that no matter what happened, we had each other's backs. But lately, things have been different. I wish I could pinpoint exactly when it started, but it was like a slow shift, like boiling a frog in water. At first, it was little things, a glance at her phone that lasted too long, an odd smirk when she got a text, her laughter sounding forced when I cracked jokes she used to love. Then it escalated. She started working late more often, constantly exhausted when I initiated sex, and she became way too protective of her phone. We had our normal ups and downs, but this felt different. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe she was just stressed. Work had been crazy for her, and she always prided herself on her career. But I knew my wife. When she was stressed, she vented. She came home, kicked off her shoes, poured a glass of wine, and unloaded on me about how her boss was an idiot. Lately, nothing. Just a vague, ugh, work is so annoying, and then silence. When I'd ask if she wanted to talk, she'd shake her head and scroll through her phone instead. She was in her own little world, one that didn't seem to include me anymore. Then there was the perfume. Laura had always worn perfume, but she had a signature scent, the one I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. But this was different. One night, she came home smelling like something floral and expensive, something that lingered in the air when she passed by. I asked her about it, trying to sound casual, and she laughed it off. "Oh, I was just testing out a new fragrance at the mall," she said, a little too quickly. My gut twisted. She hated floral perfumes. But I let it go. Then came the business trip. A last-minute, urgent trip that her job required her to take. It didn't sit right with me. Laura had never had to travel for work before. Her company rarely sent people out of state, let alone at such short notice. I asked questions, and she snapped at me, which was another red flag. "God, Ethan, do you have to interrogate me every time I go somewhere? It's work. Not everything is about you." That shut me up. I let it go for a few days, trying to convince myself I was overthinking. Maybe I was just being paranoid, reading too much into things. But then, fate threw me a lifeline. A receipt. It was a stupid mistake on her part, really. A small, crumpled piece of paper shoved into the cup holder of her car, one I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't grabbed her keys by mistake one morning. I was going to take her car to get gas since she always let it run to empty. I reached in, saw the receipt, and something in my gut told me to look at it. It was for a diamond necklace. A $3,500 diamond necklace. From a jewelry store across town. Purchased last Tuesday. My blood ran cold. I could still remember that Tuesday perfectly. She had come home late, claiming she had a team dinner with her coworkers. She had showered immediately when she got home, her phone glued to her hand the rest of the night. But the receipt told a different story. And the part that really hit me? The receipt had a handwritten note on the bottom. "Can't wait to see you wear this." I stared at that receipt for what felt like hours. It was like my body and brain disconnected. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, and my stomach twisted into knots. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading, the one I had been trying so hard to deny. My wife was cheating on me. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to. I wanted to storm into our house, shove the receipt in her face, and demand to know who the hell she was buying expensive jewelry for. But I held back. I needed more. I needed proof. Because I knew Laura, and I knew how she operated. If I confronted her now, she'd spin some elaborate lie, gaslight me into thinking I was insane, and make me feel like the bad guy. So instead, I waited and watched. And what I discovered was worse than I could have ever imagined. After finding that receipt, my mind spiraled into a dark place. I couldn't just sit on this information and pretend everything was normal, but I also knew that if I confronted Laura too soon, she'd just weasel her way out of it. She was good at lying, too good. So, I played the waiting game. I started paying closer attention to her behavior, tracking her excuses, and noting every inconsistency. And let me tell you, once I opened my eyes, the signs were everywhere. Her phone became an extension of her hand. She never left it unattended, always flipped its screen down, and God forbid I even glanced in its direction when it buzzed. She started working out more often, despite never being the kind of person who cared about fitness. She'd come home after these so-called gym sessions looking too put together, flushed, sure, but not the sweaty mess she should have been. Then there was the shift in how she treated me. Some days, she was overly sweet, almost guilty. She'd bring me coffee, ask about my day, even initiate sex out of nowhere, as if trying to throw me off. Other days, she was distant, irritated by everything I did, acting like I was a nuisance in my own home. I'd ask simple questions, like what she wanted for dinner, and she'd snap at me like I was accusing her of murder. Then came the biggest giveaway, her weekend plans. Laura had never been the type to suddenly develop new friendships, yet now she had a supposed girls' night, at least twice a month, and the details were always vague. When I asked who she was going out with, she'd list off names I barely recognized, and when I pressed for more, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Why do you even care? It's just a girls' night." I played dumb, letting her think I was just some clueless husband, but I was keeping track, and it didn't add up. The nights she claimed to be with her friends? Those were the same nights she was spending obscene amounts of money at restaurants and bars I'd never heard her mention before. I knew because I checked our bank statements. Another thing she conveniently stopped paying attention to. At this point, I needed more than just my suspicions. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't wiggle her way out of. So, I did what any desperate man in my position would do. I started digging. And what I found nearly made me sick. One night, while she was in the shower, I finally got my hands on her phone. The passcode was the same as always, a rare misstep on her part, and I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I had to know. I went straight to her messages. Most of them were innocent, normal, but then I saw it, a conversation with someone named Ryan. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out, but I forced myself to read. And that's when the pieces fell into place. Ryan wasn't just some coworker or friend. The messages between them weren't casual. They were flirtatious, intimate, dripping with inside jokes and references to meetups. My stomach turned as I scrolled further, seeing texts like, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. And can't wait to see you again. I miss your body already." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My worst fears were staring at me in black and white. There were pictures too, nothing explicit, but enough. Selfies of her in her car, a shot of her wine glass at some dimly lit restaurant, a mirror pic where she was wearing the goddamn diamond necklace. The one I hadn't seen her wear once around me. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, my mind racing between fury and devastation. I wanted to scream, to throw her phone against the wall, to storm into the bathroom and demand answers. But instead, I put the phone back exactly how I found it and walked out of the house. I drove around aimlessly for hours, my thoughts an absolute mess. How could she do this to me? How long had this been going on? Was it just him, or were there others? And most importantly, why? What the hell was missing from our marriage that made her seek out another man? By the time I came home, she was already in bed, oblivious to the emotional war that had just waged inside me. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, wondering how she could sleep so peacefully while I was drowning. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. I needed more, needed to catch her in the act, because if I confronted her now, she'd find a way to turn it around on me. No, I needed to make sure that when the truth came out, there was no escape. And I had a plan. I couldn't take it anymore. The waiting, the uncertainty, the constant emotional toll, it was eating me alive. I had the proof, the undeniable evidence of her betrayal, and I wasn't about to sit by quietly and let her get away with it. But I had to be strategic about it. If I confronted her too soon, it'd be her word against mine, and she'd spin the same bullshit lies she always did. I needed to catch her off guard. So, I waited for the perfect moment. That moment came about 2 days after I found the texts. Laura had been acting a bit more distant, but she was still doing her usual routine, running errands, checking her phone, and pretending everything was fine. But I noticed something strange. That same night she had the girls' night planned, which I now knew was really a date with Ryan. She left early, citing a work emergency. But she didn't grab her purse, didn't give me a kiss goodbye, just a quick, rushed, "Bye, babe," as she darted out the door. It was the most awkward thing she had done in weeks. I could tell she was nervous, but I couldn't figure out why. Maybe I was just paranoid at this point, but something in the back of my mind told me this was it. So I followed her. I know, it sounds crazy, but I had to know. I couldn't just sit back anymore while she lied to my face. She drove to a fancy restaurant across town, a place I knew she had never been to with me. She parked, but instead of going inside alone like I had expected, she waited. My heart sank when I saw Ryan pull up and get out of his car, grinning like an idiot as he walked over to her. They hugged, too long for just friends, and she kissed him on the cheek. That was it. I didn't need to see any more. The world seemed to stop in that moment as I watched my wife, the woman I had spent almost a decade with, act as if I didn't even exist. I couldn't hold back anymore. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought I might break it. My mind raced, everything from anger to disbelief to just pure hurt. How could she do this to me? She had been my world for so long. I had never cheated, never even thought about it. But here she was, giving herself to another man while I was sitting at home, completely in the dark. When I walked in the door, she was already home. The house was quiet, but I wasn't about to let it stay that way. I couldn't. I went straight to the living room, stood there for a moment, and just stared at her. Her eyes darted nervously, probably sensing the tension in the air, but she didn't say anything. I didn't say anything either, not yet. I needed her to crack first. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, I spoke. My voice was calm, almost too calm. I saw you tonight. Her face paled instantly, but she tried to recover quickly. She forced a smile, though I could see the tremble in her lip. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone too innocent, too rehearsed. You and Ryan. I continued, my voice still steady. I saw you. You two looked pretty cozy. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, holding up the picture of her wearing the necklace, looking so comfortable with him. Care to explain why you're wearing that necklace he bought you, by the way? Her face went from nervous to defensive in an instant. She took a step back, trying to appear casual, but I could see the way her eyes darted, searching for an escape. Ethan, you don't understand. It's not what you think. I let out a bitter laugh. Not what I think. Please, save me the lies, Laura. I saw everything. The texts, the photos, the receipt. I know exactly what's going on. She put her hands up as if trying to calm me down, but all I could feel was rage building up inside me. Ethan, please, just let me explain. Ryan is just a friend. We've been working together on a project, and yeah, sometimes we've gotten a little close, but it's nothing serious. That necklace? He bought it for me as a thank you for helping him with something at work. She was speaking so quickly now, the words tumbling out of her mouth in a frenzy. It's not like that. You've been so distant lately. I didn't know how else to get your attention. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity of it. The lies were rolling off her tongue like she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. Really? A thank you gift for working together? Come on, Laura. You expect me to buy that? My voice cracked, and I could feel my chest tightening with a mix of anger and disbelief. What? You think I'm stupid? I saw the way you were with him, the way you two were touching. Don't insult me like that. Her eyes flickered for a second, but then she quickly recovered. You're being paranoid. I've been working hard, and you've been too busy with your own stuff to notice me. I'm sorry if I try to feel good about myself for once, but this is nothing. It's nothing. Just drop it, okay? She was practically begging me to believe her, but I was done. I was done with her lies, done with the constant gaslighting. She'd broken me, shattered the trust we had, and now she expected me to just forgive her because she said so? It wasn't happening. No, Laura. I'm done. She stood there, stunned, for a moment, before her expression twisted into something I hadn't seen before. Anger. Real anger. You think you're perfect? You think you haven't messed up too? I've tried to be patient with you, try to make this work, but you've shut me out for months. Ryan's been there for me when you weren't. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that she was still lying, or that she was trying to make me feel guilty. She wasn't even sorry. Get out, I said, my voice breaking. Just get out, Laura. She stood there for a moment longer, a mixture of shock and rage on her face, before storming out. And just like that, my marriage, everything I thought I knew, was over. The moment the door slammed behind Laura, the weight of everything hit me all at once. The silence that followed was deafening, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My body felt heavy, my limbs numb, my chest tight with emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Anger, sadness, betrayal, it all blended into one overwhelming sensation, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do with myself. I sat down on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. 1 minute, I had a wife, a marriage, a life I thought was solid. The next, it was all gone, shattered like broken glass that could never be put back together. The worst part? She hadn't even fought for it. There had been no desperate apologies, no real remorse. Just anger, defensiveness, and an attempt to turn it all back on me like I was the one who had failed our marriage. That was when I knew I had done the right thing. There was nothing left to save. The next few days were a blur. I didn't go to work. I barely ate. I ignored the texts from mutual friends who had no idea what was going on. I just existed in this fog of pain and disbelief, trying to wrap my head around how the person I had loved and trusted the most could betray me so effortlessly. The house felt different without her in it. Empty, hollow. Every room was a reminder of the life we had built together, the inside jokes, the lazy Sunday mornings, the whispered promises that clearly meant nothing to her. I kept replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind, dissecting every word, every expression on her face, searching for something, anything, that would make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. She had chosen him. She had lied to my face for who knows how long, and she hadn't even had the decency to be honest when she was caught. I wanted to believe that some part of her had loved me, that some part of her regretted what she had done, but deep down, I knew better. If she had truly cared, she never would have done it in the first place. Then came the text. It was late at night, and I was sitting in bed, staring at my phone, wondering if I should block her or if I even wanted to hear what she had to say. I hadn't expected her to reach out so soon, not after how she had stormed out, but there it was, her name lighting up my screen. We need to talk. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just a demand. I let it sit there for a while, debating whether I should even respond. But I knew that if I didn't, she'd just show up at the house eventually, and I wasn't ready for that. So, I replied, "What is there to talk about? You made your choice." Her response came almost instantly. "I never wanted it to be like this. Can we please meet? Just once. I owe you that much." I almost laughed at the audacity. She owed me so much more than a conversation, but against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe I needed closure, or maybe some small, pathetic part of me still needed to hear her say she was sorry. We met at a coffee shop the next day, a neutral place where neither of us could lose our tempers too easily. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting by the window, her fingers tapping anxiously on the table. She looked different, or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. The woman sitting across from me wasn't my wife anymore. She was just a stranger who had worn her face. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the warm, genuine smile I had fallen in love with years ago. It was forced, uneasy. I sat down without saying a word, waiting for her to start, because this was her mess to clean up, not mine. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Ethan, I'm sorry." I wanted to believe her, but the words felt empty. She must have seen the skepticism on my face because she quickly continued. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just need you to understand. It wasn't about you." That sentence alone almost made me walk out right then and there. Not about me. I had given her everything. I had been faithful, supportive, loving. I had never once even looked at another woman, and she wanted me to believe this had nothing to do with me? I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Then who was it about? Laura? Because it sure as hell wasn't about us. She sighed, running a hand through her hair, clearly frustrated. "I don't know. I felt trapped, okay? Like we had been together for so long, and I didn't know who I was outside of us. And Ryan, he made me feel different. Alive. I know that sounds horrible, but it was never supposed to go this far. There it was, the same tired excuse cheaters always used. I didn't know who I was. I felt trapped. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I had heard it all before, seen it in 1,000 different stories online, but it still cut like a knife hearing it from her. "So, you destroyed our marriage for a thrill? Because you were bored." My voice was calm, but my hands were clenched into fists under the table. "You could have talked to me, Laura. You could have told me you were unhappy. Instead, you went behind my back, lied to my face, and slept with another man. And now what? You expect me to understand?" She looked down, guilt flashing across her face for the first time. "I don't expect anything, Ethan. I don't know how to fix this." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You can't. That's the thing. Some things aren't fixable." And that was the truth. No amount of apologizing, no amount of excuses could erase what she had done. She had broken something that couldn't be put back together, and I wasn't about to spend the rest of my life trying to piece it back with someone who didn't even regret it until she got caught. She looked like she wanted to argue, but for once, she didn't. She just nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll pack my things," she said quietly, as if she had finally accepted what she had done. I didn't say anything as I stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there with her regrets. Maybe one day she'd understand what she had lost, but by then, it wouldn't matter. I was done. I was finally, truly done. After Laura packed her things and left, I was left in the quiet emptiness of the house that used to feel like home. The finality of it all sank in like a weight pressing down on my chest. I didn't cry, not then, not immediately. I had no tears left. What was there to cry for? The person I had given everything to, the person who promised to love and cherish me, had shattered our life in the most heartless way possible. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal, the lies, or the realization that I had loved someone who didn't truly love me back. But as the days went by, I started to feel a shift. The anger and confusion that had consumed me slowly began to fade, replaced by a kind of numbness that wasn't quite relief, but it was something close. I had moments when I wanted to reach out, to hear her voice again, to pretend that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to how they were. I wanted to believe the lies, the excuses she had fed me. I wanted to believe that maybe she was just confused, that it was all a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. The person I had been living with wasn't the woman I thought I married. The woman I married would have never done this. She would have never betrayed me in such a callous, selfish way. I had to accept that, and for the first time in a long time, I had to focus on myself. The hardest part wasn't the confrontation, the discovery, or even her walking out the door. No, the hardest part was letting go. Letting go of the future I had imagined with her, the plans we had made, the dreams I had thought we would share. It was hard to face the fact that everything we had built together was a lie, that I had been living in a fantasy while she was living in her own world of secrets and deceit. But as time passed, I started to see things more clearly. I started to remember who I was before her, the things I loved to do, the parts of myself I had neglected while I was so focused on her. I took up hobbies again, things I hadn't even realized I had missed. I spent more time with my friends, the ones I had neglected when I was so wrapped up in my marriage. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again, like the person I used to be before Laura came into my life. And while I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure what my future looked like, I began to feel hope again. I started to believe that life wasn't over, that I could still rebuild and move forward. There were moments, of course, when I'd think of her, those fleeting, painful thoughts about the life we had shared. But they didn't consume me like they had in the beginning. I didn't want her back. I didn't want the lies, the manipulation, the feeling of being second to someone else. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I can spend the rest of my life mourning what we had, or I could choose to heal and move forward. I chose healing. A few months later, I ran into Laura. It was completely by accident. I was at a bar with some friends when I saw her walk in with Ryan. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, and she was wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She spotted me across the room, and for a second, I thought she might come over, try to talk to me. But she didn't. She just stood there, frozen, like she wasn't sure if I would still be angry or if I would even acknowledge her. And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had no desire to confront her or make her feel guilty. I simply didn't care. I didn't need her to apologize, to explain herself. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. So, I turned around and walked away. I didn't need closure from her anymore. I had found closure within myself. It was time to stop looking back and start moving forward. It wasn't easy. There were days when I questioned myself, wondered if I had missed something, if I could have done something differently. But in the end, I realized that I couldn't change the past. What mattered was what I did now. And now, I was taking control of my life again. If I had any advice to give to someone going through a similar experience, it would be this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And when the person you love betrays you, don't let them make you feel crazy for feeling hurt or angry. Your feelings are valid, and you have every right to demand honesty and respect. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking your pain is not justified. And above all, don't lose yourself in the relationship. You matter. You are enough, and you are worthy of love that is genuine, loyal, and real. As for me, I've come a long way since that day. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm getting there. I'm stronger, more self-aware, and more determined than ever to live a life that's true to me. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that I don't need anyone else to validate my worth. I am enough, and I will always be enough. It had been nearly a year since Laura left, and life had found its rhythm again. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was mine. I had found a new sense of independence and strength that I never thought I had. The ache from her betrayal had faded, replaced by the kind of quiet peace I hadn't known in years. I started dating again, cautiously, but I wasn't looking for a rebound. I just wanted to feel like I could trust someone again, without the looming shadow of betrayal. There were dates that didn't go anywhere, awkward conversations and mismatched personalities, but there were also moments of genuine connection. I didn't rush it. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not myself. I had learned that I was enough on my own. But life, as it tends to do, threw me a curveball I didn't expect. A few months after I started getting back out there, I had an encounter with Laura. I wasn't looking for her, not at all. In fact, I had worked hard to forget about her, to erase the memories of what we once had. I was out with friends at a local bar, one I hadn't visited in a while, just enjoying the night and not thinking about the past. We were in the middle of a conversation when I felt someone's eyes on me. I glanced around, and there she was, standing across the room, with Ryan beside her, looking exactly like I remembered. The same smile, the same confident posture, but there was something different in the way she held herself. She was older now, a little more worn, the spark in her eyes dimmed. Our gazes met for a brief moment, and I could see the surprise and hesitation in her eyes. I didn't know what she was expecting, maybe some emotional outburst, maybe a confrontation. But instead of feeling anger, I felt something else. Indifference. It was the strangest sensation, almost like she wasn't even a part of my life anymore. The woman I had once loved so deeply seemed like a stranger, a ghost of a past that didn't have any hold on me anymore. I could feel her staring at me, probably trying to figure out if I would approach her, if I would still harbor resentment. But I didn't. I didn't need to. I didn't go to her. I didn't say anything. I didn't need an explanation, didn't need her apologies. Instead, I smiled to myself, knowing that I had moved on, knowing that the person I had been, hurt, confused, angry, no longer existed. I wasn't bitter anymore. In fact, I felt sorry for her, in a way. She had destroyed everything for a fleeting moment of pleasure, and now, she was left with nothing. Ryan didn't look any different than he had before. He was still the same smug guy who had taken my wife from me. But I couldn't bring myself to care. He wasn't my problem anymore. What struck me the most was that for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I had spent so much time worrying about what went wrong, about whether I would ever be the person I once was. And now, I realized I was better. I was whole again, but this time, the version of me that was built from the rubble of betrayal, the one that didn't need anyone else to validate his worth. I had learned to love myself first. I had learned that closure didn't come from someone else's apology or explanation. It came from within. As I turned my attention back to my friends, laughing and joking around, I knew that I was finally at peace. I could feel the old weight lifting, the constant burden of trying to make sense of a broken marriage slowly disappearing. The truth was, I didn't need answers from Laura anymore. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. She had tried to take something from me that I never should have let her, but what she didn't realize was that she had only forced me to become stronger. I was no longer bound by the past. I was free. That night, I went home with a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in a long time. I was no longer chasing ghosts, no longer letting someone else's mistakes dictate my happiness. And while I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious with someone new, I knew that whatever happened next, I would face it with the confidence and self-assurance I had gained from learning to stand on my own 2 feet. There would be more challenges, more heartbreak, but I was no longer afraid of them. I knew I could handle whatever life threw my way. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was finally living my life for me. And that was the most freeing feeling of all.